Hello and welcome to the beginning of a very special series. So it's 2019 and that means that we're coming up to the end of the year, but also we're coming up to the end of the decade. The 2010s are almost over. So, to celebrate this, I have decided to count down through my favourite games of the decade. This is not the same thing as I have done as part of the Geeky Brummy team, where we did the games of the decade. This is about my favourite games. 10 videos with 10 games in each to give you 100 games of the decade. I have really played that many games. So the idea behind this is this video will be 100 to 91 and you'll get all those, and each day until all the videos are out, you're going to get another 10, gradually counting down until we find out which games are at the top of my favourites, essentially. A couple of little things before we begin. Should be noted that this is my personal countdown. If I have not played a game, it doesn't make it in. It's as simple as that. Like, if I haven't played it, then I can't say whether or not I liked it. And so as a result, there may be some things that you might think have been omitted that I've just overlooked. Chances are I either don't have much interest in that game, or I have it and just haven't got around to playing it yet. This is entirely based on what I have played in the last 10 years. Secondly, feel free to discuss the choices that I've made in the comments, but please be respectful. Like, if you feel something's been omitted, feel free to say, but don't be like, oh, you forgot this one. Chances are, again, I might not have played it. So with that in mind, let's get started, shall we? So the first game is Song of the Deep, which is a game that was made by Insomniac, the people who did Ratchet and Clank, and they did other such things. This was like when they were kind of going around different publishers trying to get, like, just sort of experimenting a bit, really, before ultimately they ended up just getting bought out by Sony by the end of the year, this year anyway. But yeah, I really liked Song of the Deep. It wasn't a massively innovative game, but it was a nice game, I think is the best way to put it, as terrible a description as that is. Basically, it was a Metroidvania, underwater. It's an undersea Metroidvania, one of those. You're going around in a sub, I can't remember the name of the main character, the girl. It's Meryl, I keep going to say Meryl, but that's Ellen Rose's character in the D&D Ox Venture things from outside Xbox Extra, all that stuff. It's not that. It's similar to that though. But it's just a really nice little game. Very chill for the most part. There are bits which are stressful. And it's just a really nice, solid Metroidvania. It doesn't set the world on fire, which makes sense because it's underwater, I guess. That was terrible. I'm sorry. But yeah, it was good. But obviously its position at 100 meant that it was just good enough to make the list, but not good enough to get higher. So, but it's good. Check it out if you can. Bioshock 2 is, of course, the sequel to 2007's Bioshock. It's not quite as good as the first Bioshock was. It felt a little bit like an expansion pack more than its own fully fledged game, with some repetition, particularly in regards to like the little sisters and having to take them around and do that in every level. But it was still a really well-made expansion pack, and so that's kind of why it's here. It was still an enjoyable experience despite those flaws. It was really good to get a different perspective on Rapture, and especially to get a perspective from that of a little sister later on in the game. That was a really interesting section of the game that I really liked, and I thought that they did some really good stuff with that. There was also some genuine tension with having like the big sisters constantly hanging around here and there. I thought that was kind of a nice touch, even if at times it did get kind of frustrating. But it was just a nice addition to it. Lots of things right, but very flawed. But still a pretty good Bioshock game. Broken Age is a point-and-click adventure from Double Fine, sort of drawing on their experience when they were doing like the LucasArts point-and-clicks back in the day. So your Grim Fandangos, your Monkey Islands, and that sort of thing. Broken Age is kind of a modern version of all of that. It's about two people. It's about a girl called Vela, who is in a fantasy world plagued by a monster, and you've got Shay, who is a boy who lives in space and is treated like a child and essentially locked in this spaceship and wants to try and escape from it. It's a really, really well written game. Double Fine are very good at writing very funny stories and also just having really great visuals, and this is kind of further proof of that. You've got some really great humour, you've got some really gorgeous cartoony visuals that I really, really like, and on top of that, just there's some really interesting twists with the story. It goes into some really unexpected places, and I really enjoyed the journey that it took me on. And it's backed by some really good voice talent as well. It's got some issues here and there, but ultimately it's a nice little journey that I really enjoyed for the most part. So they reached the conclusion of Desmond Miles' story in Assassin's Creed 3, and which was the sort of modern framing story that kind of oversaw the whole series to this point. And I was very excited for this one because I'm one of those weird people who actually was following the modern story and kind of enjoying it, and I thought that Assassin's Creed 3 was actually really, really good. I know a lot of people didn't like it for one reason or another, and that's fine. But I really liked it. I felt that it was a good change of pace after 3 games of Ezio. As much as I loved Ezio, he didn't need 3 games. So it was good to kind of move into a different time period, move into a different place entirely, come from the perspective of a different character. It's a Native American as well, so it's a really cool perspective to have from that angle, rather than just here's another... Because like Ezio's from a rich family, where it's like, you know, here's a native during the Revolutionary War and all the treatment with that, and that was really cool. I really liked sort of where it took some of the gameplay, so it took it out into the wilderness. You had like the homestead stuff, that was cool. You had the ship stuff, which I hear was really expanded on in Black Flag, but I haven't actually played Black Flag. Assassin's Creed 3 was the last game I played, but I really liked it. It's very much just sort of Assassin's Creed formula, doesn't really do anything revolutionary with it, but it's a good solid game that I feel got a little bit more maligned than it deserved, really. I really liked Assassin's Creed 3. Not the best one, but pretty good all the same. So, this is Epic Mickey, which was not quite the game that it was promised to be, because, you know, we saw all this cool concept art that came out about this game, and it was like, oh, you know, look at this really dark, moody version of Disney, and it wasn't quite that, but I think they found a nice little balance between that really dark, edgy concept art and the sort of cutesy art style of that. It's a big throwback to a lot of the sort of early Disney cartoons, the early Mickey Mouse stuff, and as a bit of a nerd for like old animation, that's kind of the main appeal for me. It's a lot of throwbacks to that sort of era. It was a really solid 3D platformer that I thought did really well at what it was doing, even if it was a little bit flawed. The camera was terrible. I'm putting that out there. I think that's the main reason this isn't higher, is just the camera was that bad. But Epic Mickey, really, really cool little game. And just, again, I think it just largely appeals to that sort of animation nerd in me, and especially with all the sort of nods to like Disneyland rides and just little things like that. I just really, really liked it. Yeah, it had a lot of heart, a lot of joy to it, and did something really interesting with a Disney property that you don't really see in a lot of licensed games. So yeah, I liked Epic Mickey. Alright, hear me out. So, I know there are already people watching this who are going like, what? You've included this thing? Alright, so let's talk about DMC, shall we? First of all, gonna get this out of the way, I haven't played DMC 5 yet, so don't expect to see that on this list, although I have a feeling it probably would show up on here, but I haven't played it yet, bear that in mind. Secondly, there's a lot wrong with DMC, I'm not gonna lie. The story's terrible, the dialogue is written by an edgy 14-year-old who's just discovered the F word and thinks it's funny. But apart from that, it's actually a really fun game. Like, the mechanics of it are actually really fun. I had a lot of fun when playing this. I didn't intentionally go out of my way to play it, I did it because of a certain series that ran on this channel, and in that video I was needlessly harsh towards this game, but I did revisit it and I was like, this is actually pretty fun. I mean, I had fun with it when I was recording it originally, but I actually really still enjoy it. I think it's just a fun, fluid action game. It is bogged down in some really unfortunate choices with dialogue and story, and which is weird because Alex Garland wrote stuff for it, and it's like, you did Ex Machina and 28 Days Later, what's going on with this writing? Why is it so bad here? But I don't know. But anyway, DMC, better than people think it is, which isn't the most glowing recommendation, but it is pretty good. So Final Fantasy Type 0 is an interesting one. This hasn't really been a great decade for the Final Fantasy series, in my opinion. I played a demo of Final Fantasy 15, did not like what I was playing. There hasn't really been much else of note, aside from this and one other game you're going to see on this list. So yeah, Final Fantasy Type 0 is not the greatest Final Fantasy game, but it is still pretty enjoyable. I really liked the combat in this. It was real time, but it kind of reminded me of like a Platinum game in a weird way. Like, it wasn't as in-depth as a Platinum game, but it definitely kind of reminded me of just the feel of it. Story was reasonable, even if it was ultimately, let's send these children off to war. And at the end it just gets weird. Very, very weird, but the experience of playing it was still very enjoyable, and I liked it, so there. So yeah, Final Fantasy Type 0, again, it was mainly down to the combat more than the story though. Just really enjoyable battles. Not as great a story, but still a good time. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. It's a fun little platformer, isn't it? Again, it's not one of the sort of greatest games ever made. It's not gonna sort of win awards for originality. It's just more Donkey Kong Country, and it's fun. And Donkey Kong Country Returns hasn't made the top 100. It's just fallen out of it. But this I really enjoyed a lot more than the first one for some reason. I just feel like it just felt a bit more fluid, and I kind of liked the addition of like the other Kong family members to just sort of shake things up a bit. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, really. Again, it's one of those games where it was fun to play, but it's really hard to explain why it was good. It just was good. Just some really solid mechanics and stuff like that, really, if nothing much else. So yeah, that's why it's here. Just solid game, solid platformer, very worth playing. So I've not exactly been quiet about my less than enthusiastic feelings towards the current version of Tomb Raider, the current trilogy. There's a lot of issues I have with it. I don't feel like I get the sort of sense of exploration and wonder that I got from the older games.
good, but it's dull.
Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the worst of the bunch due to some inconsistent writing and just it feels just directionless a little bit. But that said, I do have to praise it for a few things, and that's why it's here. It's here for a reason. It's still a really fun game. It's a really solid game. The mechanics are good. Really liked how they tried to bring in more confident aspects of Lara's character. They really did start to bring a lot of that in, and it was good to see that because that's kind of what I want out of Lara Croft as a character. Someone sort of confident, brash and sassy. That's kind of what I want, and they didn't bring in enough sass yet, but they get in there, I think. There's also a bit more focus on tombs and exploration and ancient sites and going through all that, which has been lacking in a series called Tomb Raider for a while. I also really liked the fact that you had the difficulty options that turned off Lara's incessant telling you how to do all the puzzles the moment you walk into a room with a puzzle and things like that. I really liked that those options were there, and it was solid, well made. But again, I feel like the series needs to really get its direction correct going forward. You've got a good foundation here, just build on it and have a more confident design style. Mega Man 10, and this is another one of those games that's really good, but really hard to talk about and say why it's good. The main reason why this is good is just because it's a good Mega Man game, really. Mega Man is always a good time when you're playing Mega Man. I will admit that I didn't quite get into it in the way that I got into some of the classic ones. I think because when I played it, I'd been playing a bunch of other Mega Man games and trying to just catch up on the whole series, and it kind of was just like, I think I've played enough Mega Man at this point. But it was still really good. Again, it's one of those things where it's just a really solid Mega Man game. I have nothing more to say about it, really. So, yeah, Mega Man in it. And so on that note, we've reached the end of this video. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow with 90 to 81. And I'll see you then. Bye!